Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Strip Search, the comic strip podcast with me, Chianca, here as always with my partner in cartooning, Dave London. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Pete.
We're doing things a little differently today, as people who are watching our video might have realized that there's a third head hanging out. We're actually allowing our special guest today to join us for our introduction, Pat Sandy, the cartoonist behind Next Door Neighbors. Hello, Pat.
Hello, guys. How you doing?
Good. We're going to officially introduce you shortly, but just so
Okay.
our listeners weren't confused at who that third voice is, we want to let people know you were here. So we'll be talking to Pat in a minute or two, and we're also later in the show are going to do a special little segment involving this year's Ruben winners, some of whom have been guests on our show in the past. Dave, you were pretty good at explaining what the Rubens are.
So it's this sandwich. You can make it with corned beef. Oh, wait, no, that's the other Reuben. Okay, the Reubens are to cartooning what the Oscars are to movies. It is the gala award show of the grand winners every year of various categories of cartooning awards. So there's the actual Reuben, which is the overall award, but then there's categories of awards such as comic strips, gag cartoons, advertising, books, editorial illustration, and so on and so forth. We don't have a key grip award or sound, but other than that, it runs the gamut.
Well, and the fact that several of our guests have gone on to win those awards leads me to the natural conclusion that coming on our show leads to winning Ruben Award.
I think there is a correlation there. I think it is not insignificant.
Yeah.
So we will be getting to that later in the show. I did want to share before we got started one comic strip related experience I had this week. So I've been going through whenever I can, I pick up one of those complete Peanuts collections, and I've been sort of working my way through, and I'm reading the 67-68 collection right now. And I was surprised in the 1967 there was a joke about how bad the New York Mets were. And it seems like if you didn't think Schultz was prescient, I mean, still applicable.
It wasn't just one gag. I believe there was more than just the one. I mean, he kind of brought it up often, so that was awesome. That was bad years for the Mets.
It was, but as we know, by 69 they had turned it around. So
yes, indeed.
I'll have to keep my keep reading through to see if they turned around in the eyes of Linus and company.
My books of those era are dog-eared. They really are. I love that collection.
Well, the era, I read. So I started by I don't have the early ones. I think I started with like 58. So I have like 58 to 72 that I've been working through, which just feels to me, maybe because that's again, I read all of those growing up, but this feels to me like the quintessential Peanuts era. Maybe, give or take a few years on either end.
It's my favorite era of the strip. It really is.
How about you,
So,
Dave?
About my favorite Peanuts era, it's hard to pick. I think that you something about like the strip you read as kids, right? That era you read.
Right.
So so for me, it would have been like that later 70s, early 80s is probably when I remember it a little more clear than probably what you guys are referring to then. But I just think
that's when I was reading it in the newspaper too. But I feel like I just had tons of books that must have collected those earlier ones, because
that was the era. The late 70s was the era of the reformatting, the going to the 3-panel, and things were changing. And then he had to resize it a few years after that. The scale of it and everything, it was vastly different. It really was.
His originals, I remember sort of, you see, I've never seen him in person, I don't think, but they were huge, right? Didn't he draw very large, or I think maybe all throughout his tenure, but early on.
Those early ones for sure. I think those, by the time you got to the late 70s, I think the realities of print were starting to affect the production of that strip. And I think it got smaller it scaled down, went to the 3-panel and all that. Then he started, in the late 80s, I think he started using like Zipatone or something. It was kind of different for peanuts.
We might have to explain for people what Zipatone is. I think that's
an industry term or dot pattern, sticky dot pattern, I guess, which can now be done on a computer. So go figure.
Right. Yes. All of us are old enough to remember cutting it with an X-Acto knife.
Right. X-Acto knife.
For you guys with your art, for me, I'm thinking when in the newspaper, when we wanted to have a block of text that stood out, we had the translucent Zipatone that you would actually cut a square and paste over on the paste. This is now we sound like we just got off our horse and buggy. This is like
the horse and buggy. Yes, well put. So
All right. Well, thank you for my little peanuts departure there. But let's get into the meat of what we're going to talk about today. And in case people were wondering, Pat Sandy is a longtime cartoonist and illustrator whose cartoons have appeared in newspapers, magazines, children's books, and on greeting cards with American Greetings, where he worked in a variety of roles over 30 years.
Keeps me off the street during the day. So
exactly. He may not do that anymore, but he does teach at the Cleveland Institute of Art. And of course, he is the creator of the comic strip Next Door Neighbors, distributed by Anders McNeil Syndication and Go Comics since 2016. And he just really, did I get that right? 2016?
Yes, indeed.
And he just released the second compilation book of that comic strip. It's called Block Party. Welcome back to Strip Search, Pat Sandy. nice little video plug for those of you.
I did kind of go, so yeah.
I have mine here too.
Yeah, we got a little book thing. Oh, very perfect. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Finally put out another book. It took me forever. Part of it, some things were kind of taking up the personal time last year, but I think what it was picking the strips, and I chose the pandemic era for some sickening reason, but so it does key in on that time period.
We Pete and I sort of come up with questions to ask all our guests, and we actually have a question about the pandemic. So I'm going to go out of order of what we originally were going to start asking, given that you brought it up. So Block Party, obviously the 2020-2021 era of the pandemic. Talk about your thinking about, the strips you chose and just the drawing of the pandemic era strips.
Okay. I will say that the discussion amongst all of us, if you guys will recall back in those days, was how in the heck do we talk about this, right, in a strip? And I know a lot of people in the field kind of avoided it. If it was a gag-a-day type of strip or a panel, maybe it was not, it was pretty easy to avoid it. But I think if you have a strip that is rooted to whatever extent in reality, the Deweys are bizarre, but there's some level of reality to the strip, some day-to-day reality to it. I had to somehow deal with it. I believe you guys did as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we did. We went through, I think, that same sort of thought process. Do we attempt to ignore this, or do we just reflect what's happening in our own lives? And we went with the latter.
Yeah, I think I kind of went with the idea. It affected the Deweys, obviously, but I think that the Deweys being Deweys were going to just do what they were going to do. So I had to find a way, and it took a few weeks. I mean, my recollection was the pandemic, chronologically, at least the way I recall it, started on March 14th of 2020. And I remember that day they said the following Monday, the whole world shuts down and all this kind of thing. And I had to find I'm generally speaking 2 to 3 weeks kind of ahead generally. And I weigh my words when I say that, but I was ahead enough with my material that I had at least a little breathing room to think, how am I going to do this? So I treated it sort of I think the initial story arc was Jan decided to clean the basement. That's kind of what it was. And, starts giving him stuff to do, which ironically was exactly how we handled it with my wife Joyce. She's coming in and okay, well, let's start cleaning. Let's clean this closet and all this kind of thing. And we all know that that's not Norm's forte, cleaning anything, right? So she kind of ruined things for him. But I somehow found a way to incorporate, how do I want to put this? Not the joke into the pandemic, but the pandemic into the joke. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it just sort of a natural progression. Some of yours in this book, I noticed, they're not even, the joke isn't pandemic related, but the bartender's wearing a mask, or, you know, it's like, it's
well,
a,
that was a big issue at the
yeah,
time. I recall there was articles like in Daily Cartoonist or something where all the cartoonists were adapting to drawing these masks and stuff. That was a pain. My characters have big noses,
yeah.
Yeah,
Dave somehow drew masks on anthropomorphic dogs. I still like that.
Yeah, it's true because
you know,
depending on the shape of the character, it's not a human shape necessarily.
right. And it gets in the way. I mean, it really, I guess what I did is I resolved to just deal with it, no matter how clunky I thought it might have looked visually. I just did it anyway. And then the small-minded Norm started coming out in some of these jokes. I think there's a sequence in there where Deke is bemoaning that he's going to lose the bar or whatever, and he keeps talking to Norm about it. And Norm goes to Jan and says, he says, I forget how it goes, but he says something to the effect of, we should do something with the stimulus money. And then she says, oh, you mean give it to Deke? And he's like, no, I want to buy a flat screen TV. So that kind of thing kept coming up. And it worked its way out of the strip, fortunately, very organically. You just kind of run out of gas with the material. And I think I spent about maybe 7 months referring to the pandemic in one way or another.
Yeah.
And then you just have to move on, and you just have to go to different things.
Yeah, it actually went a lot longer than I anticipated, because the pandemic went on a lot longer in certain ways. And I know we sort of wrapped it up. It was like, must have been Christmas of 2021, maybe.
Yeah.
And it ended with, oh, next year we'll have a big New Year's party and blah, blah, blah. And then we wound up doing 6 more months of jokes because it just wouldn't end. It just,
it was this ongoing thing. And I after a while, I think I made a conscious decision. It was probably maybe about 8 months into it, and I thought, I'm just not going to do it. Just kind of gave up on it and decided to move on and treat it that way.
Can we just, for the few people who might not be as familiar with the concept, can you talk a little bit about, I like what you just said, and this could be the title of your next book, the Deweys being the Deweys are just going to do what the Deweys do.
The Deweys are going to do what they're going to do. Yeah.
Or you're also a musician. That could be a song. It has a sort of Sinatra beat to it there.
That's got a kind of a groove sound to it. I like that.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you want the Deweys to be your neighbors, I guess, is the question for people who haven't read the strip or aren't as familiar.
Well, I always tell everybody, and after all these years, I've kind of got it into a bit of I don't want to say a canned answer, but an answer that I'm satisfied with. And it's basically Norm Dewey, and I've said this before in some level of promotional material, that he's that guy. And I always use that terminology very specifically. He's the neighborhood, that guy. And I think that I've found out over the years that everybody seems to know somebody like Norm, and the neighborhood guy that has to overdo everything, play the loud music, have the Halloween decorations, so on and so forth, overdo everything. And he's also, this is something that's kind of dawned on me over the last few years, is that there's something, and God, this is going to sound so weird. There's something aspirational in somebody that really couldn't care less like Norm. There's something nice about not caring about somebody's opinion, sort of. And he is sort of wired like that. Very self-centered, does what he wants to do, So I think there's an element of that as well.
But the thing I love about the strip is you somehow managed to take the character who in another strip might have been the sort of side, the neighbor character. It's like Seinfeld, but it's Kramer is the star.
I think I was telling you guys this a while back. Some element of it, at least. I have this enjoyment of aberrant type characters, and this goes for sitcoms, and we're talking about various shows or whatever, but I've always liked the character that is repellent as a person, and I don't know why. That's no reflection on me, so it's just not me, but the character that is just that is so repellent and that people can't stand them has, in my mind, there's a humanity there and there's a humor there. And very early on in the strip, unfortunately, it's kind of archived your Go comics, but you go to the early days of the strip, and he really is just foul, just plainly foul and stuff. And he certainly has not changed his stripes at all. But I think over the years, there's become, and maybe this is aspirational on my part, but he's become somewhat human in that I think we can all relate to I just don't want to do this. I mean, today's strip is something about fixing a toilet, right?
Right.
I don't want to do that. That's something that I don't want to deal with it. So I think there's a little bit of, when I say aspirational, I think there's probably a little Norm Dewey in all of us. We won't admit it though, but.
Yeah. And there's heart there that, it's sort of, since we're talking about sitcoms like The Simpsons versus Family Guy type dichotomy, like I can watch, I've always, or certainly in the early days, loved The Simpsons because as horrible as Homer was as a husband, there was always heart behind it, and you liked those characters. And I've never got into Family Guy, which has some very funny segments and sequences, but they're just not likable people to me. So I think
in Norm's case, I had there's a sequence in there in the new book, which is for sale. There's a sequence in there where his new boss, and I think both of these sequences are in there, where he gets a new boss and then she decides she wants to rehab him. And I think that's in there. And they all kind of lean on him to change his stripes, right? They have him cut his hair. He gets kind of cleaned up, and it doesn't work. He finally just flips out and it doesn't work. So that's kind of all of us. We don't want to be fiddled with.
No. I wanted to mention, by the way, I loved how the book, since we're all showing the cover, you went with sort of a weathered look.
Yeah, hold it up in front of the camera there.
The cover, and people watching on video. No, you can't see it online, but yours is better. Because it's funny, I took it out of the envelope. I was like, Sandy sent me a used book. What's it
say? Did it look that legit?
So, and then I realized that was the look of it.
I'll tell you the inception of that. I was this is probably like 5 years ago. I got this. I was actually going to do that on the first book. I was in a bookstore. It was a used bookstore. They had a bunch of old Fawcett Crest paperbacks, the Dennis the Menace, Wizard of Id, this type, Peanuts and everything. And I actually wanted this book to be that size even, which is like, they were like 4 by 6 inches or something, and only maybe 80 pages or whatever. And I got to tell you, that's awfully hard to source. That blew my mind. I mean, even the crappy paper, the newsprint stuff and everything.
Yeah.
Even some of those paperbacks, like on the edge of the paper, on the sides here, it would be like red or something, So I was trying to do that, and it just did not work out. So I brought at least the general aesthetic to the front of the book and stuff. So
yeah, that was the days before the trade paperback took over, where everything was literally a pocket book. You could fit in your back.
Exactly, yeah. And honest to God, I mean, I really wished I had been able to pull that off, but the sourcing, I spent at least, oh my God, probably 2 years trying to figure out how I would pull this off. And I just kind of gave up, just went with standard issue with a little phony edging or aging or whatever on the edges and stuff.
Well, that works. It even has the little, it looks like the Fawcett Crest logo in the upper left there.
I tried. Yeah. But it was fun to work on. What's that?
No, I'm going to dive into the tech question. Can you talk about how you actually got that look on the cover?
Oh my God. I have a friend that was helping me put it together, Mr. John Cardinal. Hi, John. And I went around the horn on it. I got to tell you, I was getting proofs back, like on the back of it, I was trying for browning effect on the back, browning on the edges, right? And I was getting color banding issues where it was picking up like pink randomly or magenta or something. And it wasn't working. So that took, you guys have been down this road too. It took me about 6 or 7 proofs to get this the way I wanted it. And the tough thing with, this aging aesthetic is getting pretty popular anyway. But I mean, if you want to do it right, you can't plan for some of it. It has to look kind of random. And the perfectionist in me is always trying to fix frames and all this kind of thing. So I had to, at some point, leave it and just let it be the aging effect that I'd put on there and stuff. But I kept fiddling with it for sure.
So like literally step by, tell our listeners and our viewers how you got the look. What tools did you use to do it?
Got some filters online, bought some filters, crinkled paper, this type of thing, folded paper filters, that kind of stuff. And really all you do is you put them in there, and I'm certainly no expert, but you just burn out all the white and use them as a tiff of sorts, and then mess with the multiplying and all that. But after a while, you end up doing too much of it, and it almost looks a little phony in a way, and it doesn't look as authentic because it keeps, getting overdone and stuff. So I had to walk a fine line there. And even on the right side, I think I was trying to add grease stains and all this kind of business, and I could have easily overdone this, and it would have looked like it was run over by a truck or something. But I just, I called it a day on the amount. Actually, I also wanted the line at the left to line up with that score fold that they do on publication, and that worked out. So that's the one thing I kind of truly planned on. So
I remember when this is going back a ways, but the Woody Allen movie Zelig, where he turns up in all the old
everywhere
footage. And I remember reading they actually would rolled out the film and stomped on it.
Yeah, that look got all the crackles and stuff and everything.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
He showed up in that state everywhere. Yeah. No, it's
I don't know if we're allowed to talk about Woody Allen, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, no, it's just something I probably I had a good enough time doing it the way it was, and then next time, who knows, I'll maybe buy a bunch of copies and run over them and legitimately put aging into it. I don't know, so, but it's nice to have it out.
So this sort of leads into the question. We've talked about this obviously in the past, but just to get it out again for any new viewers and any updates. So your process of drawing the strip itself, we always like to talk about the tools people use. And I know you, at least at the time, were old school with pencil and then inking it in. So if you just want to talk about your process and if you've tampered with anything on the new end.
Well, I did get a Cintiq, so I definitely got on board with that. I still am not drawing on it, so I still go old school, but boy, do I love drawing on this thing. I was doing like Wacom pads and all this kind of stuff for years, and the Cintiq allows me to do how I wish to do it on the strip, and the way I go about my routine. It's way more comfortable with a Cintiq. I will eventually get to drawing on the Cintiq at some point, but I do it old school generally. I mean, I draw, I rough it up, I ink it on a light board, and scan it in. And then, then I'll do all the coloring and all that kind of stuff or corrections and so on the Cintiq and so on.
And something you do, which is I'm amazed by, just that your hand lettering. I think people who have got the ability to do that sort of crisp, unique hand lettering, it's just fantastic. I love looking at it. I've sort of I've decided just to use the computer lettering just to avoid looking crappy lettering, and you just have such a talent for it.
Oh, bless you. No, I in my case, it causes a lot of problems in that I'll end up starting over. And so it's that perfectionist thing, right? So I'll start lettering something and it doesn't look right, and I'll actually throw it out and do it again. So there's a little bit of overdoing it, but the lettering, I don't know. I like how it looks on there, and I guess I probably could, make it into a font or something. But I think I like the process of lettering. I don't know why. I think there's something meditative about it, and I enjoy it. So, and that strip again is fairly simply drawn strip. So over the years, I gave up a long time ago, really trying to make everything really, really tight. So there's a lot of mistakes in the strip anymore, but it's only because I'm just letting the line go down as is over the pencil work. So, it's a lot of fun.
And I know, and a lot of times, when you publish it, you're doing the color version of your strip for publication on the dailies. Okay. And I like how you'll have sort of you'll have the one panel where it's like that silhouette, but it's a color silhouette of in front of a tree or in front of the house or what have you.
Right. And when I do stuff like that, I will actually on the screen, on the Cintiq and stuff, tighten it up a little bit, because you have to, you lay that in there, and then I cut that silhouette out, and then I select all the white and get rid of it. So you just have the black. And that's the thing that you kind of scale back, but it gets a little grimy. You have to kind of touch it up a little bit. But I do that simply because there's an element of rhythm visually to it. And it's certainly a very simple looking strip, but there still is a rhythm that oftentimes I like to use those silhouettes to break it up, or those panels where there's no copy, the penultimate third panel that has sort of a reaction type of shot and everything. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've gotten it to where I'm pretty comfortable drawing these characters, and it's not the struggle it used to be. I guess I'll put it that way. So,
how long?
Okay. Go ahead.
How long did it take for you to get the character to the look now? Because anytime, I think every cartoonist goes through it. You start the strip and the look looks a certain way. I mean, just, take another strip, take Garfield, take whatever have you. You know, there's that development to get it to the modern version.
It's dramatic. It really is. The first strip, I mean, again, you can see it on Go Comics, but in the first strip, his head is the shape of a pencil or something like that. I don't know what happened. But over the years, I would cringe as I was drawing this, and you're kind of forced to keep it going because you can't just jarringly draw it completely different one day, right? So you allow it to evolve a little bit. And in the last, I would say 2, maybe 3 years, he got to where I'm cool with that. And there's still times where I'm drawing it thinking, wow, I don't like that, but there's not much you can do because you got to keep moving forward. It's such an, the strips are so fascinating in that regard because I think I've said this before. They're like writing the great American novel one sentence at a time. That's all you get, or 2, 3 sentences or whatever. And you don't get much more than that. So you get this daily, or however the cadence is, 3 times a week, whatever, but you get this little dollop every time you create something. And you might be inclined to want to do this dramatic change, but you really can't. You have to keep this. It's a very measured thing, It's interesting.
So obviously this is book 2. So the riches you earned from book 1, did you buy a mansion in Cleveland? Are you an owner of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Currently living in Hawaii in a huge mansion and stuff. And I have a plane, a Cessna. And yeah, it's bringing in the riches and stuff. I think for me, and you guys maybe are wired similarly, I think to be able to have it out was something that I tended to look at like a little kid. And it's like, wow, I'll pull this thing out, not to do another ad here, but I'll pull it out and I'll start reading the thing.
Yep.
And I'm just going, wow, okay. That's funny, And then I'll go to one, I'll say, nah, that didn't work too well, but okay. And you start reading it in this rhythm that you intended for somebody else to see it in. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I sort of think of it, not to take over the interview here and jump in. You're obviously our guest, but I sort of, like, look, obviously, I don't think you go into sort of putting out a book or putting out a cartoon strip thinking, well, I'm going to be a gazillionaire. Like, it's the rare person who ends up at that, level. So I sort of think about it, every time somebody buys one of our books, we're not making $1 million, but we have our art and our writing in somebody's, hands, in their bookshelf, in their personal library. And there's something special.
That's well put. And I think that's how I am. When somebody comes up, it doesn't matter to me who it is or whatever, but if they come up and they say, wow, I think that's really funny, or I thought that was really funny, or something to that effect, that touches me, because somehow whatever you did got to somebody enough that they wanted to let you know that they enjoyed it. And in this big old world that we live in, I mean, I'll take it. I think there's a lot of strips out there that are fantastic, and everybody is trying to get somebody's eyeballs, right? So if I can manage to just get a few people that really dig it and stuff, that's pretty rewarding in a way. Now, do we all want to be millionaires? Of course. So
yeah. We're not going to say no to the money, Do you guys remember Arthur, the movie from like 1981?
Oh yeah.
Dudley Moore plays Arthur. There's this great scene at the end where his family doesn't want him to marry Liza Minnelli, and so he goes off and he decides to marry her because they say they're going to not give him the money. But at the end, he goes off with her and he chooses her, and she's like, all right, we'll be happy, don't worry. He's like, well, I'm not stupid, I took the money. So
right, that's what I'm saying. But again, because I know I've said this one before, but I mean, we're in a what I think is kind of a golden age of comics and cartoons and comic strips, and clearly the internet is kind of part of that. There's so much good stuff out there, and I try so hard not to sound Pollyanna about it, but like I said, when I'm looking at the book and I'm reading it, suddenly I forget that I created it, and I'm reading it thinking, wow, that's okay, not bad, so small victories, I guess.
And I liked how you put it about writing the great American novel, 2 sentences at a time.
Well, you did.
There's something satisfying about seeing them all together and thinking, wow, these actually hang together okay.
That is exactly my point, Pete. Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough balancing act. And so then you see people, God, I just saw Ray Billingsley just hit 35 years with Curtis, right? That's a lot of content.
Yeah.
So it's impressive. It really is impressive.
Do you know how many strips you've drawn?
Oh, let's see. Since I'm on a 5-day-a-week cadence, as they call it, and I've been doing that since 16. I changed to 5 days a week. I don't know, probably, 1,500 maybe, something like that. And you could see dips and you can see heights. You can see when you're hitting a stride, and then you can see where you're kind of just putting stuff out. But that's kind of the nature of it, isn't it? It's sort of this river runs through it thing where you just do it.
Right. You don't have the luxury of just not doing one on the day you're not feeling it.
I'll be honest. I would redo every single one of them if I had the opportunity. So that's not a good thing. So that's why I get it out of there and just do it. I'm my worst critic.
Perfect is the enemy of the good.
Well, it is. It really is. And I think every creative that I've ever met has this to one extent or another. I have this imposter syndrome that is not helpful at all. And so I'm probably, like I said, my worst critic. So I'll read stuff and it drives me crazy. I keep thinking there's a word I'm missing here. You guys have to go through this, right?
Well, having, the duality of it, I don't critique the writing. I don't look at that and think there's a word missing. I look at my drawing and it could be, last week. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is awful. How did I,
That's exactly what I go through. Yeah. I mean,
I also do that with the drawing. No, I always, I can't tell you how many times I come up with a better punchline a week and a half later, lying in bed.
All the time. And then usually in my case, I'm looking for some, I do things that I call them elbow panels. Now it's my terminology, but it's simply a panel that's intended to move the gag forward. And oftentimes it's the second panel. And those are sometimes very difficult to write because they're not really intended to expound on anything other than get to the better panels in the gag. And sometimes I'll struggle on that stuff for forever. I've had strips baking for weeks where I can't quite get them to where I want them. It's tough.
We have done where when it's time to publish the book, we have gone back and changed the copy where we thought, and because we do it electronically, it's actually relatively easy, right? Because I've got my native and I can just go into my, my layer of text and just sort of edit it. And it's not, we don't have to redraw the whole thing. That's one nice thing about the
and they come out. I think you've had them in the book, have you not?
Yeah.
So, yeah, right.
Yeah. So we put the new ones in the books. And one of the things we do in our books is we have the author commentary sort of explaining some of that. Yeah.
And that, I got to tell you, I mean, I actually put some thought into that at one point on this second book where I was thinking of getting some level of commentary in there. And one of these days I might do that, maybe on the third book or something, and get a little more in depth on it. But I got into this pattern where the books have this Instagram format, right? So I use it that way. And I'm considering doing a little bit more elaborate with the commentary down the road, but we'll see. I tend to get awfully lazy when I'm behind trying to get these books done.
Yeah,
I drove my guy crazy because I was changing stuff all the time. So I don't know.
Well, the one thing I would say about commentary is there's this trap of falling into just making the commentary, jokey, where I think it's much more effective when it's real, when it's actual, discussion of I mean, you can have levity, but, sort of, be serious about it.
Yeah, I'm better at it if somebody rolls out a sequence to me and we're talking. I could probably expound on it a lot easier and a little bit more articulate than I could if I suddenly I'm writing and then suddenly you got to worry about structure and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So I don't know. It's easy for me to explain certain arcs if somebody has a favorite and want to know about it or whatever.
So let me ask the most important question as we wrap up here today. How can people get their hands on Block Party?
Oh, that would be Amazon for sure. Or they can get a hold of me directly through Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and we can certainly mark up the book to within an inch of its life. and send it out.
It's true. Both Dave and I got our autographed copies, so we went with the latter mode. But we'd encourage everyone to visit Amazon, to go to Go Comics and check out the daily strips. And we will have links to all of those things on our website, petpeevescomic.com/podcast. And we look forward to book 3, Pat.
So do I. I'm already kind of giving some thought to it and stuff. So I think a trio of books would be awfully fun to have. So this other one here, I think you guys might be familiar with. We'll just let that one go over. So,
that's right. Next, the initial Next Door Neighbors.
Yes.
Which was
so we're gonna do I'll do a Christmas run with these and start pushing them real hard. So people
absolutely, they make an excellent stocking stuffer.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah,
would have been a better stocking stuffer if you're able to do the small book, but if you got a big enough stocking.
Oh my God, that's one of my real regrets. I wished I could have done that, but who knows? So
maybe next time. Next time. Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining with us today on
thank you so much for having me, both of you guys. It's been a blast as always.
You're certainly one of our favorite guests. You might be. Is this the third? Maybe even the.
I think it's like, you know how like on Saturday Night Live, the people who host it, there's like that crew that has hosted it like five times.
You're on your way.
You're like the you're the Steve Martin of our podcast.
That is awesome, and I am very honored. I love being on this show, gentlemen. You do a good show. You really do. It's a blast.
Well, thank you, Pat.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And so everyone, please check out those links and stay tuned, because in a few seconds, Dave and I will be back to highlight some Ruben winners who have been guests on Strip Search. Stay tuned, everybody. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Strip Search, the comic strip podcast with me, Pete Chianca. We just wanted to take a minute to congratulate a couple of our past guests who are recent Ruben Award winners in big categories, too. Christopher Weyant took home this year's Ruben Award for Best Gag Cartoon, and he was on the show earlier in 2023 talking about all sorts of things, but one of the favorite topics we covered was talking about a very famous cartoon he did in the wake of the Boston bombings that showed 2 Yankees fans saying we are all Boston fans today, and that really took off, and he gave us a really good explanation as to how that came about and what it meant for him. Take a listen.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that cartoon, and thank you. I'm glad you liked it. It was that was one of the ones. So I was the daily cartoonist for the first run. So that was my first round on it, and having been a New Yorker cartoonist, I'm being a political cartoonist, I know what it's like to be. I was doing a deadline for when 9/11, I was on deadline for 9/11. I was literally the first cartoon that came out on 9/11 was mine. It was a piece of shit, but it was mine. I was living in LA at the time for The Hill, and I was on their time. So I was up and I had something penned by, I think before the second tower was down. It was it was out, and it was one of these garbagey cartoons. But it's the worst thing that can happen to you, because what do you say during that? And you don't want to be funny. And you don't want to be like, I can't stand these maudlin, kind of, when people die, cartoonists have to do something. It's always somebody dead. Like if I died and somebody did a cartoon of me going to heaven, I just die again. God, just don't put me in hell.
With the wings and the halo.
Yeah, and the wings, and he says to them, and I've done those. Everybody's done that. You got to do what you got to do to get to the next day. But we were on the daily cartoon, and that was the daily cartoon at that time. Ironically, we had done Cypress. It did very well, and then Shanahan, who's a great cartoonist, he doesn't do topical stuff, and he's a really beautiful artist, but he was doing much more of like a rough sketch to get it out the door, and so the popularity of the daily cartoon as an experiment really plummeted during that time, and so they almost killed it before I had my turn, and then I had my turn, and the numbers were doing okay. And then we did that cartoon for the Boston bombing. And that's why we have the daily cartoon. It was like one of the most widely spread shared cartoons for New Yorker history at the time. And Diane Sawyer closed her newscast with it. That's the image that closed the newscast today. And I had no idea, because I was in the basement working away. I was getting on to the next cartoon, because I had another cartoon the next day, and then the thing went crazy. But that's why that one really did touch, and my whole family has a real connection to Boston, and I'm a Boston Red Sox fan and Yankee country. So it really.
Oh wait, now this is
now
that's
you wait. Oh yeah, we have to press on this. You're from Jersey and you're a Red Sox fan?
Yeah. I mean, like this is surprising. Like this is what like a cartoonist would be, right? Because you just can't, especially a political cartoonist. I just can't be a part of any team that have me. So yeah, we're my whole family. My father's mother, my grandparents are from Kennebunkport, and that's where they lived. And we're old school. I mean, we were also we're pre-pennant Sox fans. We're not this, we're the long suffering, and my dad lost a fortune in the 70s betting the neighbors with the Yankees losing single time.
And now we want to hear from Will Henry, who was on the show way back in 2019, about a year after he became syndicated with his comic strip Wallace the Brave, which was this year's winner for Best Comic Strip. He talked about how he first syndicated that strip and what went into it. It's a lot more it takes a lot more than you might think. So listen here when he explains how Wallace the Brave came to be.
Sure. So I had a comic strip on Go Comics before called Ordinary Bill, under my real name, Will Wilson. But it was a little adult. There was a lot of beer drinking, a lot of drug use, a lot of womanizing. And Wallace the Brave is not that. It's definitely like, it's for kids, so I wanted to separate the two comics, which is why I changed the pen name, or, went under the pen name Will Henry. When I submitted to the syndicates, I wanted to make sure they were also just looking at it on merit and not, we have a prior relationship, which is another reason why I went into the pen name. And from the beginning, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be in print syndication, because I just didn't feel like doing the online thing. So even when it was online at Go Comics, it was building towards the eventual launch, which happened about a year ago in March. So that's kind of how it worked. I worked with the team over there to develop it, and once we felt it was solid enough, they started talking about a launch date, and that's kind of how the process went. Just working behind the curtain, putting it out to the audience. I think what they do is they release it online to kind of help build ammunition when they try to sell it to newspapers. It does this well online, or we have this book which does well. This is why you should buy it. So that was the process, getting it out there.
Now, how many days a week online was it running?
It was running 3 days a week online, but I was writing it daily. So, in the development contract with AMU, Andrews McNeil, I was still didn't secure the deal. I was writing it, but didn't secure the deal. So I wanted to make sure that they knew I had the chops to do it. They only requested, I think, 15 roughs a month, but I was making sure to give them, a month's worth every month, just so they knew that I could keep up. And I didn't want to be ignored, I guess was the goal.
And I don't think people necessarily realize how much, there is a process of development. I think people think you draw the strip, you send it in, they say this is great, and it's in the papers the next day.
Boom.
With no changes and no input. But it's really the opposite of that, right?
It's the opposite. Yeah, I think I was in development for about 3 years, but the whole process from submitting the submission was probably a 4-year endeavor. And at the time, it was, I don't want to say frustrating, but it definitely felt like you were, spinning the gears, not getting anywhere. But now that I launched in syndication, I can see all that hard work I did behind the curtain is paying off. I have a lot of backstock. The characters are way more developed than they would have been 2 years ago. So, thank you to the company for making me, pace myself.
So again, congratulations to Chris, to Will, and to all the Ruben Award winners this year. And join us again next time for another episode of Strip Search, the Comic Strip Podcast. Thanks, everybody.